Wisdom is often painted as a serene, contemplative virtue, a quiet light in the darkness. But the Greeks knew better. To the ancients, true wisdom was not born in peace, but in paranoia, forged in the crushing pressure of a god's skull, and delivered with a scream that shook the foundations of Olympus. We are told that Athena is the goddess of justice and strategy, the favorite daughter of the king of gods. But if you look closer at the blood on her hands and the monsters she created, you realize that her brand of wisdom was cold, calculating, and utterly merciless. Before we reach the spider and the gorgon, the victims of her vanity, we must witness the violence of her very creation. It began with a prophecy that terrified the king of the cosmos. Zeus, having just secured his throne, fell in love with Metis, the goddess of prudence and the very embodiment of cunning intelligence. But the oracle of Gaia whispered a chilling future. Metis would bear 2 children. The first would be a daughter of equal strength to her father, but the second would be a son who would strip Zeus of his power, just as Zeus had done to his father Cronus, and Cronus had done to Uranus. The cycle of patricide was a curse Zeus refused to accept. Driven by the primal fear of losing his dominion, he tricked his pregnant wife, Metis. He convinced her to transform into a drop of water, a feat of her shape-shifting power, and in a moment of grotesque consumption, he swallowed her whole. He thought he had ended the threat, but he had merely incubated it. Metis lived on inside him, fusing her wisdom with his, making him sharper, colder, and more dangerous. But the child she carried would not be denied. Time passed, and a pressure began to build behind the eyes of the king. It was not a migraine. It was a tectonic shifting inside his divine mind. The pain became unbearable, a screaming agony that grew until his head swelled in a frightening, unnatural way. Desperate for relief, Zeus commanded Hephaestus, the god of the forge, to do the unthinkable. With a swing of his mighty axe, Hephaestus cleaved the skull of the king of gods. But instead of brain matter or blood, a war cry rang out. From the fissure in Zeus's broken head, Athena leaped forth, not as a helpless infant, but as a full-grown woman, clad in gleaming golden armor, brandishing a spear and shield. She was the manifestation of the prophecy, a daughter matching her father in strength. But because she possessed the cunning of her mother Metis, who remained trapped in Zeus's stomach forever, she became the goddess of wisdom and defensive war. The second son, the usurper, was never born. Athena was safe. She was the favorite. She was the perfect extension of Zeus's will, but her desire for dominion would soon rival even his. Her ambition turned toward a flourishing city in Attica, ruled by Cecrops, a king born of the earth itself with a serpent's tail. The city was a jewel, surrounded by the sparkling Aegean, and naturally the cult of Poseidon, lord of the seas, was dominant there. Poseidon coveted the city for his own glory. He stood upon the Acropolis, the dry wind whipping his hair, and struck the earth with his trident. The ground cracked, and a spring of water burst forth. He promised the people maritime supremacy, a backyard of ocean to conquer. But the water was salty, a reflection of the sea, impressive but undrinkable. Then Athena descended. She did not bring thunder or earthquakes. She brought a quiet, calculating gift. She struck her spear into the arid soil, and from that hole a gnarled green olive tree twisted its way toward the sun. She offered the people not just glory, but survival. Wood for fire, oil for lamps, and food for their tables. The vote that followed would echo through history. The men who made their living on the waves voted for Poseidon. The women who managed the home and the land voted for the practical gift of Athena. Because the women outnumbered the men, Athena won by a single vote. The city was named Athens. But the wrath of a rejected god is a terrible thing. Poseidon, humiliated, flooded the lands and made the seas treacherous for the Athenians. The oracle of Delphi revealed a cruel price for peace. To appease the sea god, the women of Athens, the very demographic that gave Athena her victory, were stripped of their right to vote and their citizenship. Athena accepted her city and her glory, while the women who chose her were silenced to keep the peace. It was a cold, pragmatic trade, a foreshadowing of how she would treat those who served her. The most tragic victim of Athena's cold justice was Medusa. We know her as the monster, the snake-haired Gorgon whose gaze turned men to stone. But once, she was a mortal woman of breathtaking beauty, a devout priestess in Athena's temple who took a vow of eternal chastity. Her beauty was so profound that visitors came to the temple not to worship the goddess, but to gaze upon the priestess, whispering that her hair was more lovely than Athena's own. Jealousy simmered in the heart of the goddess, but she waited. The opportunity for punishment came in the most horrific form imaginable. Poseidon, harboring his old grudge against Athena and lusting after the beautiful Medusa, cornered the girl. Terrified, Medusa fled into the sanctuary of Athena's temple, clinging to the statue of the goddess for protection. But the sanctuary was violated. Poseidon raped her on the cold marble floor, directly in front of the statue. When the violence ended, Athena finally appeared. But her rage was not directed at the rapist god. Poseidon was her uncle, a powerful male deity whose nature was considered unchangeable. Instead, Athena turned her cold, gray eyes upon the victim. She blamed Medusa for seducing the god and desecrating her temple. In a twist of cruel irony, Athena cursed the very feature people had admired. She transformed Medusa's beautiful hair into a nest of writhing, venomous vipers. She made Medusa a monster so hideous that no one could ever look at her again without being turned to stone. Medusa was hunted, isolated, and eventually beheaded by Perseus, a hero guided by Athena herself. From the spilled blood of the abused priestess, the winged horse Pegasus and the giant Chrysaor were born, children of Poseidon that Medusa had been carrying when she was murdered. Yet there was one mortal who dared to challenge Athena, not with beauty, but with skill. Arachne was a weaver from Lydia, a girl of humble birth but immense talent. Her tapestries were so lifelike that nymphs left their forests just to watch her work. The people whispered that she must have been trained by Athena herself. But Arachne, proud and headstrong, rejected this credit. "This talent is mine," she declared. "I am better than the goddess." Athena, disguised as an old crone, descended to warn the girl to be humble. But Arachne laughed in her face, challenging the goddess to a contest. Athena threw off her disguise, and the looms were set. The contest was not just about weaving. It was a war of narratives. Athena wove a majestic tapestry depicting her victory over Poseidon and the glory of the Olympian gods, a propaganda piece of divine order. Arachne, however, chose a dangerous truth. Her shuttle flew across the loom, weaving scene after scene of the gods' crimes. Zeus deceiving innocent women as a bull, a swan, a shower of gold. It was a flawless, stinging indictment of divine hypocrisy. When they finished, even Athena could find no error in Arachne's work. The mortal was better. And she was right. Enraged by the perfection of the work and the insult to her father, Athena ripped the tapestry to shreds and struck Arachne across the head with a shuttle. Broken and terrified, Arachne tried to hang herself. But Athena was not done. You wish to hang? Then hang forever. She sprinkled herbs over the girl, shrinking her limbs, bloating her body, and turning her into the first spider, cursed to weave endlessly for all eternity. We are taught that Athena is the good goddess, the beacon of civilization and reason. But re-examine the story. Athena is the ultimate enforcer of the status quo. She punished Medusa for being a victim, because punishing a male god was too politically difficult. She destroyed Arachne not because the girl lied, but because she told the truth about the corruption of the gods. Athena represents systemic wisdom, the cold calculation that protects the hierarchy at the expense of the individual. She is the terrifying realization that in the eyes of the powerful, being right, like Arachne, or being innocent, like Medusa, is a crime if it inconveniences the system. This isn't just ancient history. It is the story of every institution today. How often do we see the whistleblower destroyed, while the corrupt executive gets a bonus? How often is the victim silenced to protect the reputation of the temple, the company, the family, the church? Athena is the personification of the corporate fixer, the one who cleans up the mess to keep the CEO, Zeus, in power, regardless of who gets crushed in the gears. We worship the order she brings, but we ignore the bodies buried in the foundation. So here is the question you must answer. If you stood before the loom of judgment, would you be Athena, weaving a beautiful lie to maintain peace and order? Or would you be Arachne, weaving the ugly, dangerous truth, even if it meant your destruction? Athena silenced the spider and the gorgon, but there are forces even the gods cannot control. Deep in the underworld, a new power is rising, one that doesn't care for politics or Olympus. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because in the next episode, we descend into the darkness to meet the one entity that even Zeus fears. You do not want to miss what comes next.